The morning light painted Eleanor Vance's Charleston villa in hues of gold, a serene haven she had built with her own hands. But the sudden chime of her smart doorbell, announcing her sister Clara and the impeccably tailored Victor Thorne, sent a shiver down her spine even before she saw his calculating gaze sweep across her meticulously tended home. "Such a prime piece of real estate, Eleanor," Victor purred, a predatory glint in his eyes as Clara nervously wrung her hands. In that moment, Eleanor knew her carefully constructed piece was no longer a sanctuary, but a target. The early morning light, filtered through the swaying palmetto trees, painted the walls of Eleanor Vance's coastal villa in soft, shifting gold. The scent of salt and honeysuckle drifted in through open windows, a natural perfume that was as much a part of her home as the carefully curated art pieces adorning its sun-drenched rooms. For Eleanor, a successful gallery owner, this villa in Charleston wasn't just a house. It was the tangible manifestation of years of dedicated work, artistic vision, and a fiercely guarded independence. Each brushstroke on her own canvases, each meticulously chosen antique, spoke to a life carved out on her own terms, a sanctuary of peace and creative freedom. She savored her coffee on the expansive veranda, watching pelicans dive into the calm waters, feeling a deep, abiding contentment that had become the bedrock of her existence. This was her paradise, self-made and sacrosanct. The digital chime of her phone shattered the tranquility. A text from Clara, her younger sister, whose calls had become increasingly infrequent and strained over the past few years. "Eleanor, darling. Victor and I are in town. Thought we'd pop by this afternoon. Hope that's all right. It's been too long." Eleanor's heart gave a familiar, uncomfortable flutter. It wasn't Clara's visit she dreaded, but Victor Thorne's. Her brother-in-law, a real estate developer whose charm was as polished as it was superficial, always carried an air of calculated intent. Their relationship had grown distant since Clara married him, enveloped in his ever-present shadow. Eleanor texted back a cordial, if cautious, affirmative, a sliver of her morning peace already beginning to fray. They arrived promptly at 2, Victor, predictably, making an entrance that felt more like an announcement. He was impeccably dressed, a sharp suit out of place against the villa's relaxed elegance, his smile too wide, his gaze too sharp. Clara, trailing slightly behind him, looked noticeably thinner, her eyes holding a tired anxiety that Eleanor immediately registered. She offered hugs, but Clara's embrace was stiff, her apologies for the unannounced visit whispered, almost practiced. Victor, meanwhile, barely acknowledged Eleanor's welcome before his eyes began their systematic sweep. "Eleanor, my dear." "Still living the dream, I see," Victor boomed, his voice echoing a little too loudly in the high-ceilinged living room. "Such potential here. Unbelievable." He didn't wait for a response, already striding towards the panoramic windows, his head cocked, assessing, calculating. He wasn't admiring the view, he was appraising the asset. "The market for waterfront properties in Charleston is just exploding right now. You're sitting on a gold mine, really. Just sitting." His emphasis on sitting felt like an accusation, a veiled criticism of her choice to simply live in her home rather than exploit it for maximum financial gain. He tapped a finger against a window pane, his expression one of profound, almost paternal, disappointment. "Think of the returns. A property like this, wasted on just solitary enjoyment." Eleanor felt a cold dread begin to coil in her stomach. "I wouldn't call it wasted, Victor. It's my home. I live here, I work here, I create here." She tried to keep her voice light, but a defensive edge crept in. Clara, seeing the shift, stepped forward nervously. "Victor, dear, Eleanor's done wonders with the place. It's beautiful." Her voice was tentative, almost pleading. Victor merely waved a dismissive hand, not even looking at his wife. "Of course, darling. Wonderful. But beauty can be monetized, Eleanor? Especially this kind of beauty." He ran his hand along the cool marble of the countertop, a possessive gesture that made Eleanor's skin crawl. "All this space. All this prime real estate. Think of the investment potential you're just letting sit fallow. His words, smooth as they were, carried the weight of a thinly veiled judgment, an insinuation that her independence was inefficient, her contentment a squandered opportunity. Clara flinched, biting her lip, her discomfort palpable, a silent plea for Victor to temper his insensitivity. As Victor moved through the house, his tour less a visit and more an invasive inspection, Eleanor's unease solidified into a chilling premonition. He peered into her studio, not at her unfinished canvases, but at the square footage. He lingered by the property lines, humming to himself, already mentally subdividing, redesigning, selling. His presence, slick and self-assured, was a direct assault on the quiet sanctuary she had so painstakingly built. Her peace, once unshakable, now felt fragile, exposed. In that moment, Eleanor knew her carefully constructed peace was no longer a sanctuary, but a target. Weeks blurred into a fragile semblance of normalcy, the unsettling memory of Victor's visit fading like a bad dream against the backdrop of Eleanor's sun-drenched villa. She had almost convinced herself the threat was imagined, a fleeting shadow cast by an uninvited guest. Then, the black car pulled into her drive again, shattering the illusion. Victor emerged, not with Clara this time, but with a gaunt, perpetually shifty man he introduced as Bernard, a property manager. Victor's usual polished charm was now overlaid with an aggressive swagger, his smile a little too wide, never quite reaching the cold glint in his eyes. He carried a leather attaché case, which he slapped onto Eleanor's pristine kitchen island with an air of practiced authority. "Eleanor, darling, good to see you're still enjoying our little slice of paradise," Victor began, his tone dripping with false cordiality, yet the possessive pronoun hung in the air like a venomous cloud. Before Eleanor could respond, he unlatched the case, fanning out a stack of dense, official-looking documents, deeds, loan agreements, notarized declarations. Each page was heavy with legalese, a labyrinth designed to confuse and intimidate. It seems Clara, in her enthusiasm for a joint venture, inadvertently entangled some shared assets. Namely, this exquisite property. A convoluted business loan, you understand. Nothing to worry about, just a formality. He gestured vaguely at a paragraph, his finger tracing a line about joint ownership, a clause that purported Clara's manipulated signature had unwittingly bound Eleanor's home as collateral. His narrative was a calculated assault, a tapestry of half-truths and outright lies woven with enough legal jargon to sound plausible. Victor leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "We can resolve this amicably. Either you acknowledge the joint claim, or we proceed with a forced rental management scheme. Think of the passive income, Eleanor. It's a gold mine you're sitting on." His entitlement was boundless, his disregard for her autonomy absolute. He spoke of her home as a commodity, an investment opportunity he was graciously bestowing upon her, rather than a sanctuary he was trying to plunder. Before Eleanor could fully articulate the furious refusal forming on her lips, a figure appeared in the doorway, pale and ghost-like. It was Clara, her face tear-streaked, her eyes hollow and haunted. She clutched a crumpled tissue, whispering apologies, her voice barely audible. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. He made me. He said it was just for his business, some papers he needed me to sign. I didn't understand. He twisted everything." The confession, muffled and desperate, confirmed Eleanor's worst fears. Clara, her beloved sister, had been reduced to a fragile pawn in Victor's predatory game, a testament to his insidious manipulation. Eleanor's initial shock morphed into a blazing inferno of rage. Not just for herself, but for the sister standing before her, a casualty of Victor's unbridled greed. "Get out," Eleanor stated, her voice low and dangerous, cutting through the thick air. "Get out of my house, Victor. And take your fraudulent papers with you. This is my home, and you will never set foot in it again, let alone claim an inch." Empowered by Patricia's guidance, Eleanor wasted no time. Helen Alcott, with her sharp, no-nonsense demeanor and a reputation for dismantling complex scams, listened with a steely resolve that mirrored Eleanor's own burgeoning defiance. Victor Thorne's game is clear, Helen stated, her pen tapping rhythmically against her legal pad. He's trying to establish a false claim of ownership, or at least leverage confusion to force you into a disadvantaged position. We will not let that happen. She laid out a clear, aggressive strategy, immediate legal review of any documents Victor presented, preparing a cease and desist, and gathering all evidence of his harassment. Eleanor felt a knot in her stomach loosen. She was no longer fighting alone. Victor, however, was clearly not accustomed to meeting resistance. A few days later, a crude, laminated document appeared taped to Eleanor's front door. Titled Joint Family Asset Agreement, it was a convoluted, legally baseless mess, riddled with vague clauses about shared responsibilities and equitable division of future profits, clearly designed to ensnare and intimidate. It bore Victor's aggressive, sprawling signature and a space for Eleanor's, underlined ominously. He expected her to capitulate, to be cowed by his relentless psychological warfare. But Eleanor was no longer the serene artist Victor had dismissed. She took a photograph, sent it straight to Helen, and then, with a controlled fury, ripped the fraudulent paper from her door, tearing it into confetti-sized pieces. His tactics were transparent now, his desperation palpable. She would not sign. She would not yield. The tension culminated on a quiet Sunday evening. Eleanor was engrossed in a new canvas, the rhythmic lapping of the tides a soothing backdrop, when the rumble of a heavy engine shattered the tranquility. A massive moving truck, an old, dented white beast, lumbered down her private drive, followed by Victor's sleek black sedan. Her blood ran cold. He hadn't just come to harass, he'd come to conquer. Victor emerged from his car, a grotesque caricature of a conqueror, his face a mask of smug entitlement. Beside him stood two hulking figures, their arms crossed, radiating an unspoken menace. Before Eleanor could process the brazenness, Victor began pounding on her locked antique double doors, the thuds echoing through the villa. "Eleanor, open up. We're here to take what's ours. You had your chance, now it's time to move your things." He bellowed, his voice laced with triumph and malicious glee. "This property is a shared asset, and your solitary enjoyment is over." Eleanor, however, had been preparing. Her phone was already in her hand, emergency services on the line. Her voice, though a tremor ran through it, was remarkably steady. "Yes, officer, he's here again. Victor Thorne. He's with a moving truck and two other men, attempting to force entry. He's claiming ownership and threatening to remove my belongings." She calmly narrated Victor's every move, his shouts, the menacing stances of his enforcers, capturing the entire unfolding incident on her phone's video recorder. Her home, once a sanctuary, was now a fortress under siege, and she, its fierce defender, was meticulously documenting the invasion. Less than 5 minutes later, the wail of sirens pierced the coastal air. Two patrol cars, lights flashing, screeched to a halt in her driveway, their sudden appearance an instant, deafening silence to Victor's bluster. The officers, authoritative and unflinching, quickly assessed the scene. They spoke firmly to Victor, who, despite his initial bravado, visibly deflated under their unwavering gaze. He fumbled for documents, a pathetic stack of the same fraudulent papers Eleanor had torn, but they held no sway. The officers quickly established his utter lack of any legal right to be on the property, let alone attempt to take possession. "Mr. Thorne, this is private property," one officer stated, his voice flat and unyielding. "You are trespassing. You need to remove your truck and your people from this property immediately. Failure to comply will result in arrest." The humiliation on Victor's face was incandescent. His enforcers, sensing the shift in power, exchanged uneasy glances. With a final, poisonous glare at Eleanor, Victor barked orders at the movers, his grand conquest reduced to a humiliating retreat, the immense truck grudgingly backing out of her driveway, leaving behind only the lingering scent of his defeated rage. Eleanor watched them go, her heart still hammering, but a surge of fierce, triumphant adrenaline coursing through her veins. This round was hers. The fight, however, was far from over. The retreating red and blue lights painted a fading tableau against the darkening sky, leaving Eleanor with a silence that felt both fragile and profound. Victor's humiliated retreat was a victory, yet the chill of his desperation lingered. She couldn't afford complacency. The following morning, Eleanor met with Helen, her attorney, in a sleek downtown office that exuded quiet power. Helen, a woman whose sharp intellect was matched only by her strategic calm, listened intently as Eleanor recounted Victor's brazen attempt. "He's escalating, exactly as predicted," Helen stated, her fingers tapping a rhythm against a legal pad. "Good thing you documented everything. We'll use the police report to immediately secure a court-ordered restraining order. That will legally bar him from even breathing in your general direction, let alone stepping foot on your property." Within 48 hours, the order was served. Victor, now legally forbidden from contacting Eleanor, found his usual channels of intimidation severed. But Helen wasn't stopping there. His actions reek of desperation, she'd surmised. People don't go to these lengths unless they're cornered. Let's pull on that thread. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed, her voice a ragged whisper. She recounted Victor's insidious grooming tactics, how he had slowly, subtly, isolated her from her friends, her family, even her own sense of self. He'd spun tales of grand ventures, of wealth and security, all while slowly tightening a financial noose around her neck. She confessed to signing documents, loan agreements, property transfers, investment forms all ambiguously worded, presented late at night, under duress, and with a constant stream of emotional manipulation. "He made me feel like I was the only one he could trust," she sobbed, "that my signature was just a formality, a sign of my support for our future. He said it was for us, Eleanor, for us." The raw pain in Clara's voice was undeniable, a testament to the profound psychological abuse she'd endured. Eleanor reached across the table, taking her sister's shaking hand. Clara, recognizing herself not as an accomplice, but as a victim, found a flicker of courage. She declared her decision to divorce Victor, to sever every tie with the man who had stolen her life. More importantly, she offered to provide crucial, damning testimony and any evidence she could unearth: receipts, emails, recordings she'd secretly made in moments of fear to support Eleanor's case. In that tear-filled confession, Clara transformed, not merely from an unwitting pawn, but into a vital, courageous ally, ready to reclaim her life and fight for her sister. Despite the court-ordered restraining order and the ominous cloud of a burgeoning criminal investigation, Victor Thorne, far from being deterred, became increasingly unhinged. The facade of his meticulously constructed fraudulent empire was crumbling, revealing not a shrewd businessman, but a desperate, cornered animal. His rage, a volatile mixture of wounded pride and impending financial ruin, blinded him to reason. Eleanor's phone became a relentless target, bombarded with his menacing calls. Each voicemail was a torrent of threats, insults, and legally baseless demands, a new violation that Eleanor, with Helen's insistent guidance, diligently recorded, transforming his aggression into undeniable evidence. He believed he was terrorizing her. In reality, he was meticulously weaving his own legal noose. One particularly oppressive late night, Victor, fueled by a potent cocktail of desperation and a misguided sense of entitlement, made his final, most foolish move. He drove his sleek, black SUV, a symbol of the wealth he was rapidly losing, to Eleanor's Charleston villa. The moon cast long, skeletal shadows across the manicured lawn, but Victor saw only the prize he felt was unjustly withheld. He was unaware of the sophisticated network of security cameras Eleanor had installed, motion-activated, high-definition eyes watching every inch of her property. Nor did he know that Eleanor, acting on Helen's strong advice for her safety, was not even in the house, having temporarily relocated to a secure, undisclosed location, monitoring her sanctuary remotely. Approaching the rear of the villa, Victor surveyed the pristine kitchen window, a pane of glass separating him from what he still considered his. With a grunt of effort, he picked up a heavy gardening stone from a decorative border and, with a vicious swing, shattered the glass. The sharp, Resonant crack echoed in the night, a sound that simultaneously triggered the villa's silent alarm system and broadcast live, crystal-clear footage directly to Eleanor's tablet. Miles away, Eleanor watched the scene unfold in chilling real time. Her breath hitched as she saw Victor clambering through the jagged opening, his silhouette framed by the moonlight. He moved with a frenzied, possessive energy, directly toward her home office, clearly searching for something specific. Her heart pounded, a primal fear coiling in her gut, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of cold, strategic resolve. She immediately dialed 911, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "There's a break-in at my residence," she stated, providing the address and a precise description of Victor. "The suspect is Victor Thorne, who has a restraining order against him. He's currently inside my kitchen, moving towards the office. I'm watching him on my security feed." The dispatcher, hearing the live updates and the clear mention of a restraining order violation, escalated the call. Within minutes, the quiet coastal street erupted with the wail of sirens. Multiple patrol cars converged on the villa, their blue and red lights flashing rhythmically against the stucco walls. Officers, moving with practiced efficiency, secured the perimeter. Victor, still inside, oblivious to the approaching sirens until they were almost upon him, suddenly froze. He had found Eleanor's laptop, her digital lifeblood, and was fumbling to unplug it when the blinding beam of a police flashlight cut through the darkness of the kitchen. "Police. Hands where I can see them," a commanding voice bellowed. Victor spun around, his face contorted in a mask of shock and fury, the broken laptop still clutched in his hands amidst the glittering shards of glass. He was apprehended inside the kitchen, a picture of his own self-destruction, captured not only by the officers but by the silent, unblinking eyes of Eleanor's security cameras. His capture, caught on video and supported by the mountain of recorded menacing calls, Clara's testimony, and the violated restraining order, led to his immediate arrest on multiple felony charges: breaking and entering, burglary, violating a court order, and attempted theft. Victor's reign of terror, meticulously documented and strategically countered, was decisively ended, his own colossal hubris sealing his inescapable fate. Faced with an overwhelming evidentiary mosaic, Eleanor's meticulous recordings, Clara's damning testimony, Helen's forensic financial audit, and the undeniable CCTV footage of his final, foolish break-in, Victor Thorne's facade finally crumbled. He accepted a plea deal, a grim acknowledgement of his inescapable downfall. The terms were draconian, a lengthy prison sentence that would see his prime years vanish behind bars, the permanent revocation of all his real estate licenses, sealing his professional death, and a court order to pay comprehensive restitution to all his victims, including Eleanor's considerable legal fees. His once booming, now thoroughly exposed, fraudulent business empire collapsed entirely, its assets liquidated in a frantic attempt to settle the mountain of debts and judgments against him, leaving him with nothing but a tarnished name and a future devoid of freedom or influence. Clara, though scarred, began to bloom. The divorce was a wrenching but ultimately liberating act, severing the last tendrils of Victor's parasitic control. She enrolled in community college, cautiously exploring dormant interests in landscape design, a quiet defiance blooming in every textbook she opened. Her laughter, once fragile and fleeting, slowly regained its resonance, particularly during her increasingly frequent, easy conversations with Eleanor. The sisters, having navigated the treacherous waters of betrayal and abuse, forged a bond far stronger than before, built on shared trauma and a newfound, profound respect for each other's resilience. Clara's journey of healing and self-discovery became a testament to the power of breaking free, her life rebuilding on a foundation of genuine self-determination. Adding another nail to Victor's coffin, Owen, the private investigator Victor had initially hired to gather dirt on Eleanor, came forward. Driven by a conscience awakened by the sheer depravity of Victor's scheme and the undeniable evidence of his cruelty, Owen cooperated fully with prosecutors. He meticulously documented Victor's long-term surveillance and predatory planning, providing irrefutable records that extended Victor's prison sentence and added stalking charges to his already formidable list of crimes. Owen's testimony painted a chilling picture of Victor's calculated malice, emphasizing the premeditated nature of his attacks and the depth of his psychopathy. Eleanor Vance, standing amidst the reclaimed tranquility of her coastal villa, was no longer merely its owner, she was its architect and its guardian. The trauma lingered, a faint echo in quiet moments, a sharp memory of the darkness she had faced, but it had etched itself into the foundation of a profound new strength. Her art gallery, a beacon of creativity and independence, thrived, its walls now filled not just with beautiful pieces, but with the silent testament to her unwavering spirit. The advanced security systems, discreetly integrated and monitored, were not symbols of fear, but of an empowered vigilance, a boundary fiercely drawn and meticulously maintained. Her home, once a target, was now more than just wood and glass. It was a sanctuary forged in fire, deeply earned, a monument to resilience. The peace she found wasn't the naive peace of before, but a seasoned, unshakable calm, born from having stared down the storm and emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably whole, carrying the wisdom and strength of a woman who had fought for her life and won.